Yo, what's going on, everyone? This is Dr. Nee back with another episode. So, this is going to be a replay episode, but I really wanted to keep you guys in the loop of what's going on here in Ghana. By the time you hear this episode, we are in our first week of the mission, but close to second week in Ghana overall. Now we are in a town called, or a city called Kumasi. Kumasi is the second largest city in Ghana. I and my family originally from Accra, so we took a plane when the rest of the team came here, and we all flew as a team, a quick 40-minute flight to Kumasi. And over the next couple of days, we set up our equipment. You'll see a little bit of some B-roll as I'm talking, and you can see just some of the supplies that we brought with us, which can include anything from IV fluids to sutures to mesh for some crazy hernias that we're about to see, some antibiotics. We're talking about Levaquin, Flagyl, Ancef, Sulfoxetine. We also have pain medications, and the oral pain medications that we have are mainly Tylenol and Motrin or ibuprofen. That's it. And then we have some other odds and ends like, diathermy or Bovie pads, laparotomy pads, for operating and some other things here and there. And that is it. And then starting Monday, which today I'm recording with you, it's Tuesday, but starting yesterday, we started seeing patients. We started getting them ready and getting seen by anesthesia after evaluating them for these large hernias that they may have either in their groin or in their belly button or wherever it may be. There's some other breast disorders that we've seen that we're going to operate on also. And that's pretty much it. Right now, I'm recording this with you. It's about almost 7 o'clock at night. We've been here since roughly around 7:45 in the morning, and we've been operating since. There was a couple of emergencies that we had to add on to the schedule that delayed our cases, but we just finished a really large right inguinal hernia or right groin hernia, and basically a really big bulge on the right side of his groin. And this guy is 49 years old, and it seems like he's had it for 47 years. But it took roughly about 2 hours to get this case done just because of all of the swelling and all of the chronicity of this hernia. It just takes a lot to get back into his belly. So we fixed it, and now I get to join the rest of the team tonight. We're going to eat some dinner, talk, debrief, and then go from there. And we're going to continue this all into next week. But that's pretty much a little bit of what's going on here in Kumasi. It's, once again, this is one of the best experiences that I've been having. I've been doing medical missions since 2012, and it's a great experience. And I highly encourage medical students, residents, nurses, PAs, nurse practitioners, if you're a student in any healthcare form whatsoever, to really consider doing a medical mission trip outside of the United States, so you get to understand what it's like to have limited resources, and you get to see the amazing things that all the healthcare professionals can do with limited resources. And when you're coming here, you're really coming here to learn, you're coming here to contribute, and hopefully you get a chance to bring some tips and some tools and take it back to your higher resourced area, or maybe even vice versa, right? With the standpoint of you're going to be humble and you're going to really add to a situation, not just take away. So with that being said, I want you guys to take a look at this next episode. So this is a replay of episode 322. This is with the duo called Rich and Regular. This was a really great episode. We had them on the show talking about their book at the time, which fresh out. It's called Cashing Out, and basically focused on, if you are an employee in a corporatized world, the thought process that they had to break away from just being in a corporate type of situation, the golden handcuffs of making so much money that you really necessarily don't want to leave, but you have a whole bunch of responsibility, but you make a whole bunch of money, but you don't have time to spend with family or even to have fun spending that money, right? That's something that I think a lot of physicians and a lot of healthcare providers who make, six figures, that's something that they have to worry about. And it's a really important lesson that I think medical students need to hear. So this is a really important episode. Now, I named this episode Doctors Need to Quit Their Jobs, or Doctors Should Quit Their Jobs After 15 Years. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that doctors should stop being doctors or nurses should stop being nurses after 15 years. I'm not saying that. But if you are in one situation and you stayed in that situation for a significant period of time, let's say you've been employed or you've been in a large hospital system and you've been within that system for a long period of time, it really makes a lot of sense 10 years in, definitely 15 years in, to be like, you know what, I'm out. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to change it up a little bit. I'm either going to go into business for myself by either consulting, maybe do locums or independent contracting, or maybe completely do something different with your degree that can bring you a different fulfillment than what you've been getting. And this book really lays out the blueprint and how to do that, particularly if you're in a corporate type of experience. This episode is a banger. As always, make sure you text me. Let me know what you think about this episode. And without further ado, let's jump into this replay. This is with the duo, also known as Rich and Regular. You can find them on YouTube. You can also see the show notes below, and also check out their book called Cashing Out. I'll see you guys on the next episode. Roll the tape.
When someone says, I love my job, I've never heard a doctor say they love their job.
We normally say we love our patients.
But for me, it's like, I love my wife. I love my kid. I love travel. I love those things far more than I ever loved what I did professionally, even my entrepreneurial endeavors.
This episode is brought to you by Set for Life Insurance. Listen, docs, one of the first steps we took to pay off our student loan debt was realizing we paid way too much for our disability insurance. That all changed when we found Set for Life Insurance. They helped us with a customized insurance policy that met our needs and, most of all, budget. To learn more, check out setforlifeinsurance.com.
All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Docs Outside the Box. I'm very excited to have Kiersten as well as Julien Saunders, creators of Rich and Regular. You guys are like on this trajectory that is very amazing, a trajectory that me and Renee are watching. We're like, let's take some notes from here. But when we started this podcast, or at least when I started the podcast about 7 years ago, the podcast was because I wanted to embrace a non-traditional lifestyle. I felt as though when I was rising up going to medical school and going to all these different things, residency, that I was making all of these sacrifices in my life. And then all of a sudden, you get to that point where you have reached the pinnacle, but then possibly you may have sacrificed relationships with family, may have sacrificed relationship with friends. You may not know exactly how to, quote unquote, live, right? Because you're not sure exactly what adulting means. So that was kind of the podcast beginning to say, okay, like, this is how you take care of your loans, and this is why it's important to, keep in contact with family and so forth. But what I noticed is a lot of times it's really difficult for us to really pinpoint the reason why we wanted to kind of unplug from like this huge hospital complex. And this book, y'all, for those who are just listening, if you're on the YouTube portion of this video, I'm holding this book up called Cashing Out, Win the Wealth Game by Walking Away. This book makes it super, super easy. It delineates the reason why, we're doing what we're doing on Docs Outside the Box. But it just so happens to be coming from people who aren't physicians. So Julien and Kiersten, welcome to Docs Outside the Box. Sorry for the long intro, but y'all got me hyped like that. Welcome to the
Go off.
welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. So I'm sure you guys are doing your whole podcast circuit as well as book circuit with this book. I really enjoyed it, and I really think that anybody from whatever background they're from should be reading this book. I think physicians, medical students, and residents, anybody who's in a professional standpoint, from a healthcare standpoint, needs to be reading this book. You may not think that it applies to you, but it does. So I'm going to be very plain Jane about it. Why'd you guys decide to write this book? And then there is a very detailed disclaimer, caveat that you put in there about your perspective. Throw that in there. Why'd you decide to take it from that also?
Well, hold on, because I don't know which disclaimer you're talking about.
So probably the black one.
Exactly.
We decided to write the book for a couple of reasons, several reasons. One, we've always wanted to write a book, even before we met. Like I wrote creatively. Kiersten did the same when she was a young woman. But I think more specifically, when we found the FIRE movement, like a lot of people that get caught in the rabbit hole, like we were hooked. We were like, this is it. This is the answer to, this sort of weird point of tension that we were as professionals, having reached a level of success. You got what you asked for, you got what you worked for, but you could just sense that something wasn't right. And there were several other things going on there. And so we found the FIRE movement, and we started sharing this information with stuff like, are you seeing this? Like, this is amazing what these people are able to do. I never thought about it this way. Shared it with everybody, blogs, podcasts, you name it. And it was just like, for a second, we thought like, maybe the algorithm was broken or something, like, or maybe like, did we get shadow banned? And then we would like post something ratchet, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, that's hilarious.
So because that's what happens with us. Me and Renee, we put stuff out, and if it's like, oh, I love you, we're gonna make this relationship work. Let's pay off our debt. No views. And then we put out like, yo, I can't stand you. Like, we should get a divorce. At that 10,000 views, and all these brands are contacting. Like, come on, y'all.
It's crazy. It was crazy. So we were like, this is interesting as marketers. We were like, this is really interesting, not just from a digital and social media perspective, but just from a cultural perspective. Like, why is it that people aren't actually interested in these things? And what we realized is that people didn't see themselves in those stories. They didn't hear themselves in those podcasts. They didn't hear their stories or their versions of that, right? So if I'm talking to my friends, I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I'm from Brooklyn, yeah.
Oh, Dr. Renee, she's from East New York. Small world.
Okay. Yeah. I'm from Flatbush, and she's from Houston, outside of Houston.
H-Town. Okay.
But like, if I'm showing them, a story of a couple who saved half their income, invested, into the stock market, or got into real estate or digital entrepreneurship, or any version of those things, and then I end the story and say, and now they live on a ranch in Vermont. Like, it's great. Like, life is great. They're like, yeah, I don't want to do, like, I'm not doing that. You know what I'm saying? And so there was just a lot of people like not seeing themselves. And so for us, it was one, part passion, then two, just kind of realizing that this is a really interesting marketing challenge, one that we really wanted to help solve for. Because at the time there was no Black voices within the movement. And the last thing I'll say is we just figured out that we needed to address or find a different use case for the FIRE movement, which was different from what so many of the other existing voices and platforms had. So there's, for lack of a better word, we're all about, improving quality of life, or lifestyle optimization, or just hacking your way through life. That's great. But like, for people of color and Black people specifically, like, there are other reasons why you might want to consider taking a vastly different approach to the way that you manage your money in your career. And so instead of waiting around and expecting some of those existing platforms to speak to us, we realized actually, if they did that, they probably would not do nearly as good as a job as we might be able to do. And so we figured we would just do it ourselves instead of waiting around for somebody else to do it.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that you guys understand your audience, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that, one of the hardest parts of this content game, or at least just FIRE movement and so forth, is you can't necessarily motivate someone unless you really understand what their motivations are, or what their pain points are. And I think that even with me and Renee, like, some of the first people that we jumped on board when we started trying to pay off debt or a FIRE moment was His and Her Money. Right. Mm-hmm. Mainly because this is like 2014, 2013, mainly because we saw them and we're like, oh, although we're not, we don't have the same type of jobs that they do, they understand money in a way in which me and Renee understand money, and the things that they're trying to do with their family, trying to cause, generational wealth, the things that me and Renee, growing up in Brooklyn, growing up in Irvington, these are the things that we don't know anything about. As a matter of fact, part of the reason why we became doctors is, yes, we want to take care of patients, but there's a change in the social status that we want to have, right? And I think that the majority of people who are, who are predominantly white, they don't necessarily have that motivation. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's just a different motivation. And you speaking to that talks about that, And I was really interested in that. There's a part in your book where you talk about family members not really understanding why you're going down this lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
Because for me specifically, my mother still says, like, I don't understand what I'm seeing from you on YouTube. I don't understand. Why aren't you just operating? And I'm like, well, Mom, I do operate, but like, there are things that I want to talk about that I'm passionate about. Well, don't stop being a doctor. Like, I don't want you to, it's just like, but when I tell her why, well, I feel like I'm stressed in this form, or I'm this or that, she doesn't get it. Can y'all talk about that? Like, there's just certain pressures that, certain people have, from a family standpoint, from a community standpoint. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's hard. We're dealing with the same thing. Our parents have been along for the ride the entire time. They've, supported us when we were in corporate, and they're learning to support us as entrepreneurs with this specific message. They're very proud that we're self-employed. They're very proud that we're financially successful. But when we start talking about quitting jobs and walking away from situations and starting to change the virtues that you hold highest in your life, then they get scared. And that's really what it is. When you recognize that part of it is fear of something new, fear of moving on, fear of leaving behind what you've built your legacy on. I'm using air quotes for those who aren't watching, but like this fear is the source of their attention, of their criticism of you. Then you start to realize that like, that's not your problem, right? Like you are going to grow up in a very different world. And I'm using the term grow up, but age in a very different world, in a very different economy than the one that they did. And the reality is they may never reconcile those two ideas. And you have to acknowledge that, like, look, the band was still playing on the Titanic when it went down, right? Like happily, willingly still playing, thinking like this is what people need at the moment. They need to hear music, while everybody else was kind of getting on a life raft and like, getting off the boat. And so once you reconcile that, like, it may not happen, they may not be your biggest supporter in this endeavor, you can kind of remove that weight and that burden of trying to drag them along and just move forward and find new community, new supporters, and keep your relationship with your parents or whatever family member you're talking about healthy in other ways, right? You don't have to completely discard the relationship just
it's
because
like survivor's guilt almost.
Yeah.
For sure. And I also say this, not to toot our own horn, but we've been tremendously successful entrepreneurs. Like we've exceeded our own expectations. And even it still happens now. You know what I mean? Like our parents, I'm not going to call out the particular one, but like literally even after book launch, after Good Morning America, after all this stuff, we still had a parent come in and tell us, you need to change your message. Nobody's going to want to work with you guys.
Nobody's going to want to bring you in.
To bring you guys in if you're doing these things. And we were just sitting there and we were literally like confused. Like, this is the message that got us here. Right. You know what I'm saying? But again, they just come from a completely different era. They don't get it. They may not get it. Right. And, I'm not going to say I regret even trying, but I will say we've certainly pulled back a lot from, and in some cases completely discarded the idea that our family and close friends needed to be on board in order for us to feel whole or confident moving forward in our entrepreneurial endeavors. It's never going to happen, and I'm not going to waste my life.
You can't drag them.
You can't.
It's too heavy.
Yeah, it's not that. One of the examples we use all the time is around, rock climbing. I've literally never done rock climbing, but like it's so much as this is so deeply cultural and tied to like social norms too, but like it's a lot easier to rock climb when you don't have someone on your back, or when you don't have someone holding onto your foot. And some of the times we do it to ourselves. We like lock ourselves to our families and our cousins and all these people. And we say, because if I climb, I've got to sort of lift.
We all eat.
We all eat.
We
Right?
got to lift as we climb.
And what we're actually showing people, especially those of us who are high earners and have sort of broken barriers, is like, there are other ways to do this, right? You can get to the top. You can afford to buy some rope when you get up there. You can afford to charter a plane. Like there are other things and ways that you can do. Yeah, you can do all kinds of things. And so it's really just a matter of like, not just making people like us, like you, like your audience feel more comfortable sort of running at the pace that they know they really can, without the sort of fear or concern that they're leaving people behind.
So I appreciate your explanations. Let's take a quick step back, because the title of the book is called Cashing Out. So can you tell us, or tell the audience, what does cashing out mean, and what exactly were you guys cashing out from your careers? Because you guys are professionals. I think it's really interesting to get from you guys to say what was the issue and what caused you guys to do exactly what the title of the book is.
Yeah, so cashing out means a lot of things. I think the best way to describe it is to think about like how most people think about their careers as a game that they're playing. And we use this language all the time, like it's a game, but I think a lot of us sort of think that it's a winnable game, right? They think that they can actually win this game, and they define winning in very narrow terms. It's either getting that dream job, getting that big promotion, or getting that really big paycheck, or all of the above. And the reality is very few people win that way. And so the better way, the more efficient way, the one that actually more people have a better chance of doing in terms of winning in their careers is by being able to quit on your own terms, on your own timeline for any reason. Like, that is the real win. Like, being in a position to say, while I love being a doctor, while I love being a lawyer, or I love this industry, or even if it's nonprofit or whatever it is, I am willing and able to walk away from it, and it's not going to derail anything that I am doing right now. And I think what's specific for Black people is that in the workplace, you've got this sort of boogeyman, which is racism, that influence our experiences there, and it manifests itself in terms of the income gap, or the likelihood of promotion, or quite honestly, the failures of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in the workplace. And so all of these things are sort of compounding and really make work, if we're being honest, a miserable experience for people of color. You know what I mean? And so
it's almost like, but they accept it, and they feel like that's just the cost of doing business, of getting up to this certain level.
Yes.
We completely just accept it as par for the course, right? Yeah. And what we're doing is introducing a different way of playing the game, and giving people a different medal or trophy, if you will, which is ultimately financial independence, like not needing it at all anymore, and kind of freeing yourself from this broken labor agreement that has negative impacts on our health, negative impacts on our abilities to have a successful marriage, raise a family, and all of these other things. And so when you realize that work is really this giant obstacle that separates who you are today and who you ultimately want to be, like, you sort of zero in on that and figure, like, how do I get this thing, this block, this obstacle out of the way? And in most cases, it's about, being savvy with the way that you manage your money.
It's there are, by the time most physicians are out, we're talking realistically 28 to like 30, mid 30s. And when they're doing things on their own, mid to late 30s. So a lot of them are just like, wait, hold on a second. I gave up my 20s. I wasn't partying when everybody else was. And now, I got, not only am I in my 30s, I got like 6 figures in student loan debt. What you mean I got to cash out? I got to pay this game so I could pay this debt off. Biden is only giving 20. You're like, I got multiples of this, right?
Yeah.
To those people, I still say, like, this book is like that. Because, me and my wife, we decided to pay off our student loan debt. We had almost $700,000 in student loan debt. We decided to pay it off in 3 years, mainly because of the things that you named in your book, like the first couple of chapters of your book. Like, there's something to be said about that emotional relationship with money. There's something to be said about realizing that, hey, what's the end game here? Right? Like, the changes that maybe a lot of people may want to make in medicine, you might not be able to make it if you're within the system. And being able to come out of the system and make some of the changes that you want to have, such as doing a health fair, or maybe such as changing the healthcare in your community. And low key, shout out to the doctors that you guys gave props to in the beginning, because, that's really amazing what those doctors did for your family, right? Very important to set up that type of buy-in for them. That's the type of relationship that we have. But if you have like 50 patients you got to see in a day,
exactly,
right? Like, how are you supposed to have that type of relationship with your patients? And oftentimes, like, it's like fighting City Hall. And the best way to do that is to remove that financial motivation and just say, hey, I'm going to have to do this my own way. It's going to be difficult, but at least I'm going to have the change that I want to have. And that's why, just from the get-go, this book really jumped out at me. I was like, oh, I get what they're trying to say. And although they're not speaking, they're not giving examples of what happens in medicine, this is extremely parallel to what happens in medicine. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I think there's just a universal theme throughout the book of beginning things with the end in mind. And we're taught that for school. We're taught that for, all of our various certifications and loops that we have to jump through to get the job. But when it comes to the career, we're taught that that is the end. Like you build your identity around like this thing. And we don't have enough role models, specifically in communities of color, that show what's at the end of a successful career. Mm-hmm. I can probably think of, maybe 5, 10 people who have successfully retired that are Black. Right? They weren't kicked out because of ageism. They weren't sick and had to leave. The company didn't shut down. Like they actually picked a date, saved, and retired successfully, and have been doing so for the last 20 years, been living off of retirement, not, they've been living off of their savings. And so there's a huge gap in the stories that we've all heard. If you are, in your 40s and your late 30s, there's a gap in the stories that we've heard and the examples that we've seen around what is life after work. And the premise of cashing out is to get you to start to think about that early at the beginning of your career, even in the middle of your career, so that you can use your time at work more wisely and your money, can work harder than you can.
That concept of stealth wealth that you talked about, and particularly lifestyle creep. It's a big issue in the medical world, mainly because they're so used to, like I said, we're delaying stuff like crazy. That nice car that you wanted to get in your 20s, now that you've been able to go from like making maybe $40,000 a year, so now you want to, you're making 6 figures, you want to get that nice car or you want to get that nice house. But then you realize that, wait, hold on. All of these hours that I'm working, that paycheck that I get is only paying for those type of lifestyle moves. So yeah, you do like
for me to drive to work in parking.
Right, right. And I can't, but you buy a sports car, you can only go 60 miles per hour and it's parking in the parking lot and I'm working 15 hours. It's like, come on guys, like, look, what are we doing here? And yes, we do to see the same thing where we see 70-year-olds who are working and it's just like, dude, you're 70. Like, why are you still operating at this age? Like, your hands are like this. Because he has to. They'll give you the excuse. I love it. It's like, yeah, son, no, I'm not believing that.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not believing that. That lifestyle creep is a powerful thing.
It is. It's something that we struggled with in the beginning because we had to learn what made sense to cut from the budget. Listen, I know car people. I come from a family of car people. If cars are your thing, by all means, spend aggressively on the thing that you love, but it means that you have to cut somewhere else to make it fit, right? You still need to put your savings goals and your investing goals ahead of that. And so I think another part of the message is doing that inner work to figure out, like, what are you doing because you want other people to notice, or because you're trying to numb a different feeling, or because you're trying to send some sort of social signal that distracts people from how miserable you actually are, versus what are the things that add value to your life that you really appreciate, that you would do regardless of your financial situation, so that you know exactly where to cut in the budget. I don't know that it's a blanket piece of advice to say, don't buy handbags, don't buy cars, don't buy wine, because we buy all of those things. But
at the same time, you
got to decide what's enough of all of those things.
Yeah.
What about someone who says, like, listen, like, your advice is going to torpedo my career, versus someone who finds security in in a professional job, when, you try to convince someone that, like, that's not really security. Like, you're relying on someone else to give you a job. Like, and as we saw in 2020, even doctors' jobs are not guaranteed, right? Like, what do you say when people say, yeah, I'm not torpedoing my career for this? Like, there's no way. I can't do this on my own.
I've been there. Even on our book tour, we met a lot of these folks, man. And so first of all, there are people who just love their job, right? And they'll say that, like, why should I walk away? Why should I plan a 15-year career, which is one of the concepts in the book. And, honestly, I'm done talking to people like that. Like, I've sort of flipped it back on them, because I can't help them, but I can ask you to ask yourself a couple of different questions. And with respect to those people, it's like, well, how do you define love? Because the way that I define love may be a little bit different. So I don't use that kind of language, or I don't
take us through that. How do you do it? What do you do? What's that interaction like when you say,
like when someone says, I love my job, and more often than not, it's people like educators, or people who work for nonprofit organizations, like people who have big hearts. They love their job. I've never heard a doctor say they love their job. Lawyers, I never.
We normally say we love our patients. That's what we say.
Yeah, you love our patients, right?
Yeah.
But for me, it's like, I love my wife. I love my kid. Like, I love having the freedom to do what I'm about to do this afternoon and go hit the Silver Comet Trail, right outside of my home. Like, I love being able to go down to Florida and visit my brother and my sister. I love travel. I love those things far more than I ever loved what I did professionally, even my entrepreneurial endeavors. You know what I mean? I love those things. And so that's certainly one of the ways that we approach it. With respect to people who say,
real quick, is there any male ego that gets put into that? Because I'm sure there's got to be, like, so you rather spend time with your kids and your family than actually be a provider. I'm sure there's those trigger words that people throw in at
Very
you also.
much so.
Right.
But,
of course.
But because our audience is a little older, they recognize the perils of that male ego, where it's like, gosh, I feel this huge pressure to be this provider, but now I'm at odds between the ambitions that I have for my life, my own life, the kind of father that I want to be. I said I wanted to be this kind of dad, this kind of husband, but the way that my lifestyle is set up, I have to be at work 80% of my free time.
Yeah.
So how do I reconcile those two things? And it's like, yeah, you got to confront that ego.
Not to mention, more often than not, what they're not saying is that they've sort of signed up for this traditional order of things, these traditional male roles. I'm going to go to work. My wife is not going to go to work. And now they've reached this point where they realize that relationship dynamic isn't working. There's not enough money coming in. And so to admit that you want to walk away from your career is, in a way, an informal way of them sort of admitting that, like, I'm not earning nearly as much money as I could have, which is a bit of a blow to the ego. So it's a lot of those things. Religion also plays a huge role in a lot of these things in terms of the way that people think about it and the roles that they assume at home. And so it's one of the things that really fascinates us, which is why we actually spend far more time exploring culture and social norms than we do finance. Like, the fundamentals of finance are pretty solid. You do those things, you repeat it, you'll be fine. But knowing better is not going to sort of lead to people doing better. And we know this because we've tried. I've tried leading with data. I've gone to the barbershop and literally tried to
quoted Pew Research.
Pew Research and McKinsey.
Harvard Business
People
Review.
don't care about the data.
Yeah.
All I know is the story, right? So that's who we are culturally. And I've actually just come to embrace that and say, all right, bet. Well, let me give you some content. Let me give you a different story. Let me give you a different way of thinking about it. Let me show you different examples. And also let me live by example, because that is a huge motivator. When I'm on vacation for a month and people are wondering, like, how does that work? You know what I mean? That is probably far more powerful than any podcast I could ever produce, any blog, any book that I could ever write. It will make people really question, like, that. Well, maybe it really is working. You know what I mean? Maybe it isn't a scam. And it's like, no, it's not a scam. You know what I mean? But again, there's so many things, man. Gosh, I mean, technological illiteracy is one of the things that also influences this stuff. Like, it's so deep, man. So.
Hold up. Before we continue, to all my day ones, and you know each and every one of you who you are, thank you for rolling with the show from jump. And to the new listeners, welcome. What's good? Where y'all been? I want y'all to stay a while. All right. So look, I'm trying to build a community here and I need your help. So with whatever app you're listening to this show right now, I want you to click the subscribe button. Then I want you to go over to Apple Podcasts and I want you to rate and review the show. And you may be asking, how does this help? The way how it helps is by helping the show to grow and rise up in the rankings so that it's easier for new people to discover the show. Now, what's in it for you is at least once a week, I'm going to be going through these reviews. I'm going to pick a lucky reviewer and I'm going to give that person an opportunity to have a 15-minute session with me where we could talk about anything from personal finance, getting your money right, to just shooting the you know what about the show. So listen, remember, all I need you to do is subscribe and then rate and review this show on Apple Podcasts. Let's get on with the episode. Peace. Kiersten, what about the women who come to you and say, well, listen, like my career can only be this length. First of all, there's not too many of us women up here. There's that glass ceiling that I got to worry about. Then if I want to have kids, that's a couple of years possibly away that I'm not contributing to my 401k, that possibly I may not get that promotion because I might get passed over for that. And now you're telling me 15 years, like, I need more time, sis. Like, there's a study that just came out that showed that when physicians are looking for their first job, there's a gap in the salary that they ask for. It's a really big gap, right? So if you have a male family doc, and then you have a woman family doc, like the gap in their salary is wide. And then as you stretch that over 20 years, it gets closer and closer, but it never comes, to zero. And then they show, well, the difference would be about $2 million at the end of 20 years. Right. So you have all of those different things and you're like, wait, you telling me to deplug? Then I got to start my own business. Then I got to wait, what? So what do you say? What do you say to women who say things like that?
Yeah, women are having a hard time with this too. It's not just male ego. There's a lot of deprogramming and conditioning and socializing that women have taken on themselves, a lot of internalized oppression. And to your point, to need more time is to sign up to make less money, right? There's a similar study that looks at women's professional earnings over a lifetime because of the wage gap between Black women and white males. And you basically leave $1 million on the table.
I believe it.
For the same work, right? And oftentimes more work, to be completely honest. And so confronting that while also confronting, to your point, like what virtues we hold highest in terms of being needy or needed and being, someone who relies on a man to take care of us or relies on all of this stuff it's hard to get the message through. Like, no, you can do this. You can do this with a partner. You can do this on your own. You can do this. All it requires is that you recognize that the virtues that run through your head all day, every day aren't necessarily ones that you picked. They were given to you your whole life by well-meaning adults and men and women in your life that have always told you to play it safe. Yeah. Keep quiet, keep your head down, keep working, keep doing this. And it's like, actually, no, your best bet is to bet on yourself, is to try and do something on your own.
Yeah. And there's also just a lot of prestige in these titles, right? Like, and so, you work, and especially, you talked about our parents not being on board. A lot of it is tied to that. Like everybody wants to have a doctor in the family. And so now here you are finally getting there. And now you're talking about wanting to leave. It's very similar to me.
Like, what do you mean you want to start rapping? It's like, Mom, I'm not rapping.
Not rapping.
You know what I mean? It's like, but actually I can make, some people make more money doing some of these things, but there is not the prestige is not associated with any of those things yet. And so as a result, there's a lot of conflict and rejection and sort of internal rejection too. People are like, nah, I get into places or I have access or community tied to these things that I value. If I get rid of that, then who am I? What circle do I exist in? And they can't really see themselves in that. So this is what I meant by the technological literacy thing. And I was specifically referring to the creator economy, right? Because it's a huge marketplace that anyone can essentially jump into. But again, it's the perils of sort of that sunk cost. Just put all this time, all this money into building up this life, and now you want to let it go? Nah. So I get it. But again, living by example and introducing people to different communities, showing them a different set of role models, I think is one of the most powerful things that people can do in terms of being a motivator for the light bulb to go off and say, hey, perhaps I can leave this life alone and build something new.
Kiersten, you mentioned betting on yourself, right? When did you guys realize, okay, we can start betting on ourselves? Is that with real estate property, or is that the combination of the real estate property and then the content that you were putting out with Rich and Regular? When did that start saying, yeah, we need to deplug cash out from corporate into this creator economy that you're mentioning?
Yeah, we had already, when we found the FIRE movement, I was originally reluctant, but I eventually got on board. And we knew then that we had a plan to opt out of the workforce earlier than the standard timeline. But we both ended up leaving early. His circumstances were very different than mine. He was experiencing a toxic environment at work. And with me, it was really just recognizing the gap in development in our relationship that came from one person, me being at work all day, and him really enjoying the world. Like, he had the nerve to be happy after he quit. And after 18 months of me coming home and complaining about, ridiculous office drama, which sounds like reality television to someone who's not in it. Like, so much of our relationship had been built on us being in the same environment and being able to connect on that. Like, oh my God, Tina's
it's almost
so
like
annoying.
you guys were feeding each other. And then once he deplugged out, it's like, oh, who am I here to talk to now?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I was watching how he was finding things that he was passionate about.
Blood pressure going down, blood glucose levels going down.
Exercising, like
Not even that, but it was like little things, like, you know, when you're caught up in the grind, you know, at least for me, like personal development goals, like would just always just be left out there. You know, it's like, it's fine. And they would just roll over to the next year and next year. And it was like, man, I was able to catch up on years of things that I wanted to learn, refine, and get really, really good at in very short periods of time. And on top of that, I was able to use that to create income. You know, so the combination of the two was really interesting. It was like, yo, this is really wild. And I'm really glad I did this. I mean, several times a year, I just reflect back on walking away and being so grateful that I had the courage to do it. Because like that was the trigger for me. It was, to her point, but even before then, it was really just frustration on earning potential, right? Like
that too.
I
was tired of asking people for more money.
And even when I would go through interviews, like I just kind of felt like, you know, with companies outside of our former employer, you know, it felt very uncomfortable, like it felt like I was begging someone to pay me what I was worth, even though I knew that they were incentivized to lowball me. And it just felt like it was a game I just did not want to play anymore. And so I was just like, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. If I believe that I am the person that I've described on LinkedIn, then
That's true. It's a good point. Yeah.
Spirited leader.
You said you're visionary, results oriented, all the buzzwords, then right? And that's what we did. And it was like, all right, we'll bet. And you know, I've won more awards. And I'm not saying that to brag, but those things used to be important to me as an employer. I wanted to win the department award. I wanted to get the promotion. I wanted to get all those things. And as the title suggests of our book, is like I had to walk away to get those things. And now the respect that is granted to me from these same people and their cohorts, this is complete 180, right? Like they wouldn't give me the time of day when I was an employee, but now as an entrepreneur, now with someone who has social status and who has, you know, all of these things that they perceive, like I'm not fighting. I mean, I laugh at the amount of money that I really, really wish that they would give me as a bump to my base salary, because I get that now respectfully for like a video, a tweet, respectfully. And again, I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that to inspire people to say, this is the world that we're living in right now in 2022. And so you owe it to yourself to bet on yourself, to at least see what else is going on, what else you can do with your skill sets or interests or hobbies or whatever. Because you will get tired. You will face some obstacles. You will have some health challenges, your family, all those things are coming if they're not already happening. And you really just don't want to be in a position where you have one sole source of income and you haven't had the time to hone any of your skills or build a network that allows you to continue to build wealth.
Yeah.
The videos.
And more than what you do for a living, right? Like we're watching, I'm so grateful that we're alive in a time where we get to watch some of the greatest of all times leave the game, right? We watch Serena, GOAT across the board, leave. Why? Because it's too much for her. She can't do the things that she wants to do while meeting the obligations of her professional career.
Right.
And that feels like a valid response where it's like, okay, well, this chapter of like working for somebody is done. I'm going to move on to the next chapter in the book. But we haven't been taught to look at our lives that way, where it's like,
that's a fairly recent occurrence too, right? Like most of those athletes were like pushed off, like you got to leave, like you too old, get out of here. Yeah.
Yeah. Versus they're like, I'm going to play one more year. You guys get one more year. We'll make it a whole farewell year to prepare everybody. And then I'm done. And I just think we need more examples of that, like more examples of people who are planning their exits, who are beginning with the end in mind. Even the young ones, Naomi Osaka, planning breaks, planning different, you know, mental health care, like planning their self-care and recognizing that the professional demands are a huge part of why they're there to begin with, like why their mental health is where it is to begin with.
Now you mentioned the videos. Really interested in this because I think your videos were revolutionary and different, right? Like what made you decide, okay, let's talk about money over dinner. Actually, not even just dinner, just creating dinner. Like where did that idea come from? And like, what was like your initial, what was that discussion like? Because I'm sure people are like, man, this ain't gonna work. Like, are we sure we really want to do this? And then when you see the final product, take us through that.
So the idea really just came out of me trying to
And you're a cook, by the way, right? Like you have
I used
culinary.
To cook
You have culinary skills.
yeah. And so I used to cook professionally, but it was really about again trying to have a huge impact on the culture. And as I was at home working from home and looking at my own habits and even thinking about most people who just work from home that may have television on in the background, there are certain things that you would just have on and you're not even watching. I mean, it's just on, right? For some people, it's ESPN and they literally just have Stephen A. Smith or whoever just like constantly talking. For financial nerds, it might be CNBC and you're always seeing and watching the tickers and seeing what's breaking news or the news or something like that. Or travel TV or food TV. And I was just thinking, I was like, wow, like, what if people watched or could learn about money that way, like super casual. Like it's not, I'm going to like sit down and commit to finishing this book, or I'm going to take this workshop, or I'm going to, take this course or something like that. What if it was like totally just casual? And so we started thinking about like what the big levers that have really sort of pushed the culture forward. And we started using examples like the impact that LeVar Burton had on literacy rates in terms of what he did with Reading Rainbow. Or you think about what Neil deGrasse Tyson is doing with Cosmos and a lot of the content that he creates that makes people interested in science that would normally be interested in science. And so,
or Alex Trebek.
Alex Trebek in terms of like being one of the few, or Jeopardy, regardless of whether Trebek is hosting it or not, like just getting people to think and try to remember. It was like, wow, like imagine if we learned about money this way, right? If it was actually fun and engaging and super casual and what they call sort of edutainment. And so that was really it. I was like, people will watch food TV all day.
Yeah.
I was like, let's figure out a way to integrate that with food and financial lessons and career. And so that's really where the idea sort of came from. And then as I started thinking about the term money on the table, I was like, oh, that's actually pretty dope. So I sent that note over to the lawyer, like, let's go ahead and get this trademark situation popped up, which we were able to secure, thankfully.
That's a big deal.
But it's been great. Listen, I'm in my big age now, so I appreciate you calling it that, because I think it was groundbreaking work. What did I say? One of the biggest compliments is the idea has been ripped several times.
I've seen it. Yep, I've seen it.
I've seen it ripped by big media brands and not giving us the credibility that it deserves. And that's fine, because I understand that the internet and that game is very similar to the music industry. It's a little shady and wild, but we're willing to play that game. And so now we have a production deal. We have a partner who is, I believe, in the process of pitching it to a couple of networks. And so imagine one of our favorite shows on Hulu is Taste the Nation by Padma Lakshmi. Mm-hmm. I would love to do something like that. Or United Shades of America on CNN with W. Kamau Bell. And so these are this is the approach. I firmly believe that.
So you're literally thinking bigger.
Oh, absolutely.
We're in the process of doing it right now. I firmly believe that will have, if we are able to do that will have significantly greater impact on getting this message out there than anything else that we could ever do.
Because that is how people learn.
That's how people learn.
It's the truth.
People say, I wasn't taught this. And it's like, you overheard thousands of conversations your whole life about money.
Correct.
Whether it was there or not there.
That's a really good point.
You learned.
Correct. Yeah.
So now I'm going to have a conversation that is actually helpful and useful in front of you that you can just play, right? You don't have to take, I'm not preaching. You get to see a sermon instead of hearing one. You just get to listen.
Correct.
And it'll eventually start to take over the old thoughts where it's like, oh, you know what? Maybe I don't need that thing. Let me invest that money instead.
It's the Grey's Anatomy effect, right? You got a bunch of people who feel like they understand. How many people signed up for med
school after Grey's Anatomy?
A lot.
Right?
A lot. Yep. A lot of people jumped in. A lot of, people thought, okay, well, a lot of people went into surgery. A lot of people went into medical school, obviously, with those thoughts in mind.
Correct. You cannot create mass change without mass media, right? And so if you really do want to impact people, you have to start figuring out.
Where are you coming up with these terms, man? That's the dope term. Okay. All right.
Yeah, but you have to have to be able to tap into these other ways and play those games and learn those games. And so that's where we are. We started with our blog. We've grown from the blog to the podcast, which is sponsored by Success Magazine. We have the video series, which we've had individual sponsors and pieced it together. We're hoping to either bring it to a network or just self-fund it. We can afford to do that. But again, I feel like it has it will have far greater impact to get people who would not normally engage with financial content. You just got to not make it look, it's like Inception. You can't make it look like that kind of content. It has to look like travel TV. It has to look like food TV. And in the process, you're going to learn something about index funds.
See, there's a reason why we vibe, because the fact that you said Inception, that's one of my favorite movies of all time. So I can see we here.
Really?
We here. Oh yeah.
Did you understand it the first time you watched
Absolutely.
it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I thought that was Nolan's perfect movie right after Dark Knight. I was like, I think the scene after the snow, if he had taken another scene after that, another dream, I think he would have lost us. But it was like the perfect for me, it was the perfect level of layers. And then coming up from the layers that it was like, you're not going to lose me, but I get the point. Now, the next one he did, Interstellar, I thought that was I didn't understand that at all. It didn't make much sense to me.
What was the one that we watched where they're like running backwards? Tenet. Different director, but like it was way over my head.
Man, why do you waste a Denzel Washington's son like that on his? Why did he waste his performance on this movie? I'm like,
I love John David.
He did a good job, but it was just the movie.
The movie was like this. Yeah. But it's funny you bring that up because we recently, The Matrix had like its 20-year reunion, and we watched it again because it was showing.
Oh, part one.
Yeah, the original.
Okay.
And I remember when it came out, I did not understand it. I didn't understand the hype. But if I would be a totally different person. I would have bought Bitcoin in 2009 for pennies. Like I would have understood what it was saying to me, right?
But you talked about Bitcoin in your book, though.
We did.
Y'all dissed it.
We did. This is a hindsight like fantasy. Like, man, if I had understood The Matrix when it came out, I would have chosen different career path, made different financial decisions, been totally different in terms of tech literacy, because I would have understood what the movie was trying to teach. And then when I think about like Inception, where I didn't get it the first time, but I did get it the second time. And it's like, it kind of changed things. It shifted the way I think about my mental health. It shifted the way I think about subconscious and meditation and like how powerful the brains are. And now it's like, when you look at media and television, to Julian's point, it's like, what are they trying to tell us? What time is it on the world clock? Like what, that phrase, like art imitates life. It's like, where are we in this moment? And I think we're going to see a drastic shift in like what people think of when they think of superheroes, what people think of when they think of emergencies and challenges, like the stories that are being portrayed in movies and in content is not like, it's not neutral, like at all. And so it's a little bit of a rant, but I thought it was important to bring it up.
I get exactly what you're saying. There's like these networks and these movie studios, like there's only a certain audience or a certain amount of audience that they can reach, right? After a while, they're going to have to rely on you to create the content that can reach the audience that they're going after. Only you know what they want, right? Which is why when you created this video series, like it hit, right? It's the reason why Earn Your Leisure, that podcast, can do so well, is like they're able to take certain business topics and make it, easy to listen, easy to digest from a certain demographic that other large companies and corporations can't reach.
Yes.
And I think that is the key with this book, is just understanding that we each and all, we have a certain talent that, maybe more so we can't not yet see ourselves on a really larger scale doing it. But there's something that we bring to the table that can be monetizable. And
nobody knows bodies like doctors.
Right.
Like nobody. If you want ABC to create the content, that's how you end up with a Grey's Anatomy, which is far different from the actual reality of what people are doing. And so like doctors, lawyers should absolutely be looking at content as the next phase of their career, because that's the way.
Preach. Keep going. Preach.
That's what's
Keep
going to
going.
happen. It's a content economy. There was a time where the U.S. had an agricultural economy and everybody knew how to farm, right? And then we switched to an industrial economy and everybody understood factories and productivity and, always optimizing. And now we're in a game of content, right? We're in the game where people want to be entertained. They don't want to learn nothing. They don't want to sit in classrooms. They want to consume content and then go act and experiment and then create content based off of what they learn from the content that's the economy that we're in. It's growing rapidly. Everybody needs it. Aziz Ansari makes the joke where he has a stand up on Netflix where he's like, content, man, you got to get that content. Like it's
Right.
Hate it, man.
Right.
The content. And so for those of us with specialized knowledge or even a unique lived experience that's different from the majority, this is your moment. You have a moment, and it's a brief moment because, again, it'll get commercialized and then we'll have to move on to something else, whatever the next version of the economy is, likely AI and virtual reality. But like, we have a moment. And so we should be taking advantage of it, regardless of whether you think it's going to be incredibly lucrative or not. It's your stamp.
Mm-hmm.
So how does building or just like wealth building work for you guys now? Is it now a combination of creating wealth, making these partnerships, for media, or is it happening at the same time where you're, because you talk about real estate in your book, real estate is continuing to be acquired also. How is all of this stuff working to build this empire, such as Rich and Regular, the Saunders? Like, how does all that work?
Yeah, so the portfolio is the portfolio. These days, the only real shift that we've made is we're just playing a little bit more aggressively, right? So we've got the benefit of being able to look back on 10 years. It's been an amazing decade. It's been more than an amazing decade. But so now we're just playing a little bit more aggressive, not to the point of where we're sort of stock picking. That's not really our jam. We fundamentally believe that index fund investing is the way to go. We're looking at individuals, sectors, and things like that we know are growing with a huge emphasis on tech. We're thinking about our son. We have a 5-year-old, and so we've started his custodial account. But a lot of the income the income that we earn right now really primarily comes through Rich and Regular, which is a combination of brand partnerships. We have some products, and we'll be creating some more products in the future in terms of helping to onboard other people who don't really know how to do these things in terms of being in the creator space. Mm-hmm. Speaking, there's like brand partnerships, and all of those things have layers. The ability for you to earn income downstream. If we're fortunate enough to sign a deal to take that show to the next level, again, that's not really a money play. Just based on what we've seen, I mean, obviously we could get lucky and things pop and someone cuts a massive check. That could happen.
Issa Rae check.
Yeah. I mean, I don't
even
think
that got pulled back.
Right. We've been in it long enough to know not to get that excited about it. Yeah. Because we know just how. I mean, we've worked with a lot of people to know that even if you get the deal, get the money, shoot the content, and edit it, they can still pull it. Mm-hmm. They could still shelve it. They could still throw it, at the 3 o'clock in the morning, slot just to check the box, And so like it's no guarantees, but it's really around media. Like when we think about Rich and Regular as a whole, it's about media. It's a media content company. We create content. We partner with brands. We think of ourselves as a front door. So if you want to reach Black professionals, you got to come through this front door, right? Like, and again, it's no disrespect to other platforms, but like you use the example before, but it's like, if you want to work with them, like they have a way of sort of reaching people, like our ability to communicate ideas, the freedom in which we can do it, the creativity. These are things that companies pay top dollar for to agencies, and that we can do at a fraction of the cost. And it's still really lucrative for us. And so, it's fun. So, which is really important, right? Like money on the table is actually fun to produce. It's fun to be a part of. Obviously, the travel can be a little difficult because we have a son. But now that he's older, it's really just a matter of bringing him on.
But the exponential gain he's gaining from seeing mom and dad create content on their own terms, or create an empire on their own terms, or just whatever it may be on their own terms. Like you can't quantify that. Imagine what's the next step for him now. It's going to be amazing.
And he will have capital, right? Yeah. Like I just have the ideas and the ability. He will have all of those things, a role model and startup capital. He won't have to beg or ask anyone to do anything. And so
he can take the chances that you guys always wanted to, probably.
Of course.
We had to take the safe. We had to take the safe things, but now they get the play money and the play space to do the executive level things that we've always dreamed about.
Correct.
Yes. And that's exactly what I think of when going back to your original question about friends and family. It's like, I think about him. I think about the opportunities that I can create for him. And if not him, then his little cousins, like all the little kids in my family what we can do for them because we kept going, right?
Yeah.
Because we have extra and because we can set them up now so that in 20 years, that money has just been working the whole time. And it's like, yeah, you can go where you want to go live in Europe for a year.
Yeah.
Go for it. Like, try it.
I love it.
Those are not options that were given to us.
No.
Like you do study abroad, you better come back at the end of the semester.
Yeah, you better hope you get a scholarship, a grant.
Right.
So true. So true.
Right.
Well, listen, Julien and Kiersten Saunders, authors of Cashing Out, creators of Rich and Regular. I really want to tell you that I appreciate you guys for writing this book. Appreciate your content. You guys are almost like the North Star for me and Renee. So just want to say that, we are inspired by the stuff that you're creating. And I hope, and I definitely know that the folks who are listening to the show can kind of take some of the lessons from your professional corporate experience that you've listed in this book and apply it to the medical world also. So we're going to put links to everything that you mentioned in the show notes. Definitely this book, definitely all your YouTube and podcast content. And once again, I just want to say thank you very much for your time. And I'm really excited to see what's the next phase for you guys. And if you need someone to kind of a gaffer or someone with camera, I'm your guy. All right, I got you guys. Please.
I can tell you got the dope set up.
Yeah.
Like, man.
Y'all see
I was
this?
really just thinking that.
I got the cosign from you guys. All right.
I was like, we should do an episode on doctors. Like, I have so many questions for you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So we kind of
afterwards.
We're kind of doing something similar, but we're focusing on like you said, on doctors and other professionals who are just like, I want to spend this money, and it's just like, you sure you want to spend this money? Or I want to make this change. I want to be a part of this diversity. And it's like, but they only taken one, and there's only so much change that you're going to be able to make. And if you make that change, they're going to shelve it anyway. So listen,
so
if
that one comes from a lower cost of living area where they can do the job that you want to do for less money, it's like you out of luck.
Yeah.
Speak on it.
Like
Yeah. Speak on it.
No, but we appreciate you, man, and thank you for having us. And hopefully we can collab again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. We'll catch you guys on the next one, everyone. Thank you. Make sure everybody check out the show notes, the links that are in there for Rich and Regular. They're dope. You guys are going to learn a lot. And once again, thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, bro.